Hi, this is Kurt Johnson doing another Mindful Monday post from Shawbucks here in Jamestown, New York. You can't be happy all week if you don't start on Monday. Should you choose to be happy, life is choice. The reason I focus on mindfulness is we could all use a little mindfulness to start our week off and to focus on being happy so we can get through our week in a nice way with plenty of energy. Mindfulness is the way I like to use it, is a non-judgmental choice from a higher point of consciousness, and happiness is the focus, the centeredness, and the compass for which we can sustain and enjoy a week of having plenty of energy while being happy. The opposite of happy, well, obviously it's unhappy, and when I'm unhappy I'm feeling sad and I have a lack of energy and I really don't have a lot of energy to move through my week. And when I'm feeling happy, I've got more energy, I feel good, and I just seem to have a more positive week. So I believe that life is choice, and we have the freedom to choose love and light to create motion within ourselves and those around us, or we have the freedom to choose fear and darkness to create movement within ourselves and those around us. Love is positive, filled with compassion, kindness, abundance, gratitude, and the feelings of fear are with shame, guilt, lack, limitation, and regret. This paradigm I'm describing, or the philosophy I'm using, is what I call the energy of me. If you look up the word energy in the dictionary or online, it's the ability to create motion. And I believe that by choosing love or fear, you're choosing what energy you're going to use to create motion. And me represents mindful eatery. Mindfulness, as I've said, is a non-judgmental choice from a higher point of consciousness. And eatery simply means we consume. We consume three things. We consume a diet of thought, food, and environment. And we can choose to consume our diet of food, thought, and environment through love and light, or we can choose through fear and darkness. Life is choice. But it just so happens whichever energy you choose to create motion, you get more of the same energy that you have chosen. So choose a positive energy like love. Today I'm going to do a little talk and affirmation that relates to how often sometimes we feel that we're at the wrong place at the wrong time, not realizing that we might be at the right place at the right time, or maybe you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, but someone's at the right place at the right time. So to help me maintain my state of happy, I came up with this quote, and it's quite simple, but it's reassuring that we are always in the perfect place at the perfect time in the perfect way in love and light. And the story I'm going to tell today is about a couple close friends of mine. One I got to meet, one I went to school with, Dr. Ken Erickson, who's experiencing a crisis now I'll talk more about later. But first I'd like to tell you about Tim Desmond. And I met Tim Desmond while in the Carpenters Union some 30 years ago. And Tim and I always had a great time building and doing things together. And I just remember one of the first jobs we worked on together was up at the up on Chautauqua Lake at the Lutheran camp. And Tim and I were building this octagon roof shape on a building with a lot of angles and compound miters, and Tim was out on the scaffolding and asked me if I could come help him figure out these angles. So as I stepped out of the window onto the scaffold, we laid it out together, and I grabbed the worm gear saw, getting ready to make the cut. We're about 12 to 15 feet off the ground. All of a sudden the scaffold explodes. We both fall down off the scaffold. I wind up on the way down. I remember landing a 2x4 stake caught me under the ribs, and I literally pushed myself off, and I'm laying on the ground on my back struggling to catch my breath. I look over at Tim. He's rolling on the ground like a fish out of water, holding his knee. And all of a sudden, this other carpenter, David D'Ambro, comes up, looks out the window, and he says, "Oh my God, you guys fell that far? You guys are lucky." And Tim just simply, with his personality, quickly responds and says, "Lucky, we just fell off the scaffold." So, it's kind of a funny story, and that's how Tim and I got to know each other. And all through the years, Tim worked out with weights with a mutual friend of ours, Ken Erickson. And Ken Erickson, going through school, was friends with Tim's younger brother, Aaron Desmond. So they used to go to the gym, work out a lot. And fast forward about 15 years later, Tim Desmond was in a serious motorcycle accident, and he was heading home after a haircut, and he was going through the intersection of Southwestern Drive, driving up Baker Street to get home, and a car ran a stop sign, smashed his leg into his motorcycle, was in immediate critical condition, bleeding out. And it just so happened, 2 cars behind him, there was a nurse that knew exactly what vein to push to stop the bleeding in his leg. It was the main artery to his leg. A tourniquet wouldn't have done any good in that situation. So Tim's alive because the nurse that was there knew what to press, and he would have bled out within a couple minutes, is what I heard. So sometimes in life, we feel like we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it just so happens there's someone that's at the right place at the right time. Had Krista Petrie been at a mile behind Tim as she's going to the intersection, she might have been there too late. Had she been 50 feet in front of the accident, she might not have ever seen it or heard it. So sometimes you got to catch yourself when you feel that you're in the wrong place at the right time. Maybe you are at the right place at the right time, or someone else is that's there to assist you. It's just crazy how life comes around and goes full circles, and sometimes times of crisis reconnects friends, and it deepens your friendships. For Tim Desmond and I, maybe a couple years after he was in his accident, I asked Tim if he'd been back to the gym yet, because I knew he was passionate about that. And he used to go to the Y at 6 a.m. every day before we went to work at 8 o'clock, and I just couldn't imagine doing that. But he said he hadn't been back to the gym since his accident, and I knew I was overweight, maybe 30 pounds heavier than I am now, and I was thinking I should get back to the gym. And I said, "Hey Tim, what do you think if we go to the gym in the mornings, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6:30, work out for a half an hour?" Tim said, "Yeah, definitely, I'm in." So we did work out for a half an hour, probably 15 minutes of the time Tim and I'd work out. It was more about talking and enjoying things, and Tim would always keep me up to date on what's Ken doing. Even though Ken and I didn't hang out, I still considered him a friend. Tim told me about Ken getting his, going from a union electrician, owning his own company, going back to school to be a chiropractor, and then recently, back then, he had just gotten his PhD from Lancaster in London in health science, psychology, philosophy, and he had to defend his 313-page dissertation to get it. So when I started studying and looking into my life deeper and whatnot, I came across this book called Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And I was so fascinated with his work, obviously I started talking to Tim about it. And Tim says, I've heard Ken Erickson mention this Bruce Lipton before, and Ken's got a degree in biology. Why don't you take Ken to lunch someday, because you're so enthusiastic about learning this stuff. He's an expert, he lives in town, he's local. So this is probably March 2013. I call Ken. Tim gave me Ken's cell number. I call him immediately. He makes time, we have lunch, and we rekindled our friendship from elementary school all over again in our 40s. I just can't say enough about Ken and the appreciation and time that I've had learning about health science, psychology, and philosophy from him, and really have become best friends with Ken. The amazing thing is the woman that was a nurse that pulled over to help Ken, or Tim, had her kids in the car. She's a surgical nurse, knew what to do, but in such a weird twist, she's a cousin of Dr. Erickson's wife, Miranda Erickson, and it just so happens that's the nurse that saved our friend Tim's life. Crazy as that may be, I just found out of that recently. So our friend Dr. Ken Erickson had an emergency surgery last Wednesday at Cleveland Clinic on his heart to fix the faulty valve that he had from birth. And the doctor, he will be okay. It was a major surgery. They fixed his aorta, his valve, and there was another procedure on the upper part of his heart. So he is going to be coming home soon, hopefully this week. It's unfortunate Ken didn't have insurance, and a lot of people wouldn't understand this, but I do as a self-employed entrepreneur. When you're paying bills and 16 grand a year for health insurance, when you can have a baby and pay for it yourself for 7 or 8 grand, you're really not picturing having a major heart issue when you've been he has a couple national powerlifting titles. He's very fluent in martial arts and has always taken good care of his health. The doctors at Hammett said that he was in the body of a 30-year-old with a defective valve from birth. So he has taken care of himself, and when you're paying all the bills and you're seeing them come through, obviously hindsight's 20/20. It would have been a good idea to have insurance and maybe taking on that 16 or 20 grand a year to have a family policy. Ken and Miranda have 2 young children. Kenny's 6 years old and Colton's 2, and Ken's 52. So we both got to start later in life having families and kids, and we wouldn't change a thing. But just remember, it's not like my wife's a school teacher now, so we get our insurance through the school system. If it was up to me to do, I could have easily made a mistake. And like I've said before, hindsight's always 20/20. And I'd like to mention in this post that some friends of Ken and Miranda Erickson have set up a GoFundMe page, which there'll be a link on this page, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, that you guys can go to and assist Ken in his time of need. Ken's a chiropractor. We're seeing close to 200 or more patients a week on average, and I know a lot of his patients are anxious to get him back to work. The recovery for this surgery, for him to be able to go back and effectively, make adjustments to people, is probably going to be 2 to 3 months, more likely 3 months with 0 income, as his wife managed the office and was a stay-at-home mother. So in their time of need, I just hope that everyone could go and click on the link of the GoFundMe and send 5, 10, 20, whatever you think you can afford, 100. Any amount would help on this GoFundMe page. As I was visiting Ken before his surgery, I was reflecting on life and how we get so taken out of place so many times, and I was reflecting on being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And then I started thinking about Tim Desmond, because Tim and I went down when he was at Hammett and visited him, and it all just came together that, like in Tim's circumstance, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, but fortunately the driver 2 cars behind him, who was Miranda's cousin, was at the right place at the right time in order to save his life, knowing exactly what vein to push, because she was a surgical nurse. A tourniquet wouldn't have helped him. So in Ken's time of need, before his surgery, I was seeing that Ken, he's in Cleveland Clinic. He's at the nation's #1 place to have heart surgery. He's at the right place at the perfect time in a perfect way, in love and light, because we all care so much about him. And if you could just take a little time, sign up, join his GoFundMe page and assist him in getting well, removing the stress of not having insurance and having a few dollars in the bank to make it to the time when he gets back to work would be most appreciated. from his family and his friends and all of us that care about him and have been patients. And I've talked to numerous patients of his that are looking forward to seeing him get back to work, because he's not just a chiropractor, he also has a PhD in health science, psychology, and philosophy, and is very knowledgeable and is a very important part of our community of Jamestown and Chautauqua County, New York. So please take a moment, click on the link. I just want to thank you guys for your time and spending and watching these Mindful Mondays and supporting the Mindful Mondays. And for the quote of the week this week, we're always in the perfect place at the perfect time in a perfect way in love and light. Thank you guys. Have a great week.